So, what is God's design for gender? Well, today we're going to unpack the theological framework of speaker David Pawson. We'll trace his teachings to map out a journey all the way from creation to our modern world.
Right from the jump, Pawson frames his entire teaching as this urgent response. He sees civilization in a state of moral decline. And for him, the confusion around gender isn't just some side issue. No, it's the central battleground.
All right, so here's how we're going to break his argument down. We'll start with the cultural crisis he's seeing, then dig into his view of the original blueprint in Genesis. After that, we'll look at how he thinks it all got broken, how it gets restored, and finally, where he says it all leads in the end.
Okay, so first things first. To really get his solution, we have to understand the problem he thinks he's addressing. He has this idea that throughout history, civilizations don't really get defeated by outside forces. Instead, they rot from the inside out, morally speaking. He sees that same decay creeping into the church today and believes the church has to be a kind of lifeboat, modeling a totally different way of living.
Now, this is a really crucial distinction he makes. For him, gender is way more than just physical sex. It's the whole package, the emotional, the intellectual, the spiritual differences that he sees as a divinely designed masterpiece that sets apart the masculine and the feminine.
And if you follow that logic, Pawson then claims that any attempt to blur or completely erase that gender distinction, what he just called God's masterpiece, is actually a direct attack on the created order itself.
So what is this original design he's always referring to? For the blueprint, Pawson turns to the two very distinct creation stories in the book of Genesis.
He argues you absolutely have to hold these two accounts together. Think of it like this. Genesis 1 gives us the vertical view, looking down from heaven. In that view, male and female are absolutely equal in value before God. But then Genesis 2 gives us the horizontal view, looking around on earth, which he says outlines our functional relationships with each other.
And it's from this second account that Pawson develops his principle of male headship. He bases it on three things he sees in the text: that woman was created from man, for man's task, and after man, which in his view sets up an order of responsibility.
And this brings us to his main visual metaphor for our life here on Earth. He doesn't see the original relationship as a flat line, like a democracy. Instead, he pictures it as a slightly sloped line, representing what he describes as a harmonious order of leadership and supportive partnership.
But as the biblical story goes, that harmony did not last. So this next part explores how sin came in and just completely distorted this blueprint, which Pawson says leads to the conflict we still see today.
According to Pawson's teaching, sin just corrupted the whole design. The man's intended gentle leadership gets twisted into a drive to dominate, and the woman's willing partnership gets warped into a desire to control and manipulate. Suddenly, it's a battle of wills.
And you can see how the visual metaphor just shifts dramatically. That slightly sloped line becomes steeply tilted. It now represents a world of domination on one side and defiance on the other, this constant struggle for control instead of a partnership.
So how is this all supposed to get fixed? Well, Pawson argues that redemption through Christ isn't about creating some brand new thing for our life on earth, but actually about restoring that original design from Genesis 2. He points to the life of Jesus, and he highlights what he sees as a very careful balance. On one hand, Jesus radically honored and elevated the status of women. But on the other, when it came time to build the foundation of his new community, he maintained a structure of male leadership by choosing 12 men as his apostles.
And in the same way, he explains, the early church leaders taught this same kind of paradox. They taught absolute spiritual equality in Christ, everyone receives spiritual gifts, but they also maintained a functional distinction in roles within the church and the family, which they always grounded back in that creation order.
So here's the really crucial point. In Pawson's framework, redemption in this life doesn't make the line completely level. Instead, what it does is restore the relationship back to its original intended state from creation, that slightly sloped line of harmonious partnership.
But that is not the end of the story. Pawson outlines one final phase for humanity in what the Bible calls the new creation.
He explains that in the world to come, all these earthly social structures that were necessary for this life, and that includes marriage and its specific roles, they're just going to pass away.
And this is where that full equality from Genesis 1 is perfectly and finally realized. Men and women are no longer husband and wife, but they're joint heirs, sharing completely and equally in their inheritance.
And at last,
The line becomes perfectly level. This symbolizes the full restoration of the image of God in all people. No more functional distinctions, just perfect shared partnership.
So, to wrap up Pawson's entire framework, you can see he traces this visual line of relationship through 4 clear phases. It starts with that original harmonious order in creation, gets distorted into conflict by sin, then it's restored for our life here on earth, and finally, it finds its ultimate and perfect equality in the new creation.
And all of this brings us to a final thought to chew on. Understanding this specific theological blueprint, with all its different phases and its internal logic, gives us a very particular lens for examining and engaging with all the modern perspectives on gender, identity, and social roles today.